Hey everybody, Jam Creates here. Today I want to talk a little bit about something kind of esoteric, I guess, and it's the need to create, the drive to create. I'm sure a lot of you out there feel this. I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this video feel this way. They have this feeling. It's really ironic, and I don't think everyone feels this way, and it's hard sometimes to understand how other people feel when they feel differently from you. Some people in the world are consumers. They consume the things that creators create, and some people are creators, and some people, everyone to a certain extent, I think, is a little bit of both, but, some are 99% consumer and 1% creator, and then there's others who are, much more creator driven. And it's funny because I think what happened to me was, for a long, long time, I stopped creating. And, for a while, my creativity was filled by, my need to create was filled by the jobs I was working in, because I was working in creative fields. So that was fine. Because even though they were pretty structured kind of things, I was doing news and sports and that kind of stuff. So it's fairly, limited in what you can do. You can still have some fun and be creative with some of that stuff. And every once in a while, you might get an assignment that really lets you flex your muscles, and that's fun. And I used to do freelance video work and stuff, and that always allowed me to be a little more creative and have a little more fun with that stuff. But then when I really when I stopped doing that stuff, I really I had no creative outlet, really. But the funny thing was, the ideas never stopped. My brain, my wife knows this very well, and she's learned to deal with it. There are times when I will just say to her, "Oh, I had an idea." And she'll be like, "Oh boy, okay, what is it?" And she'll hear me out. She's very patient. She'll usually give me feedback. She'll tell me if it's a crappy idea or if it's a good idea or whatever. And, that's a good thing. To have someone like that in your life is always important. Because when you have these ideas, you want to share them. And, so the ideas, they never really stopped. And for years, honestly, for decades, the ideas were coming, and I was still always writing ideas down and never really doing anything with them because I just was doing other things. I had life and a kid and a marriage and bills and everything else. And so it really wasn't the priority. It was just something that continued to happen. And a few years ago, I suddenly, at this point, I guess it was a couple of years ago, I really started having, I felt lousy. I was really kind of depressed and had, anxiety and everything else. And I had this really, at some point, I just had this burning need to create something. I literally was getting angry because I needed to create. My mind was telling me, you must create something, you must do something. And so I did, and I started drawing again, and I started writing again, and I started doing these things, and suddenly I was much happier because I was working towards something. And I, from time to time, get into a rut. I think everyone does. And you start to feel lousy again, and you feel like these things aren't taking you anywhere. But they will. I have I've learned as I've gotten older to have more of a long view of things. And you do get impatient. I still do. I still fight with impatience all the time. When it comes to creating things. But I did learn, from when I was working in video, I learned that you can't always just sit down and in one sitting put together an entire piece, all in one shot. Now, most of the time I would do that because I had deadlines, so I had to get them done in one shot, and I didn't really have a choice. But for certain other things, I did have a little more time, and I could take my time and allow myself to stop, go do something else, come back and work on it some more, and understand that some projects take, a bigger project just takes longer. You can't get it all done in one shot. If you're gonna write a book, or if you're gonna make a comic book or something, you can't do that all in one shot. You just can't. You need to take your time, and you need to do it right if you want it to be good. I mean, if you want to just fart something out there, you could, I suppose. Or if you're trying to do like, some kind of contest or something, like they have like the, the 48-hour film festival kind of thing. Like, I'm pretty sure there's something like that with comic books too. And I don't remember what it's called, but like, something like that, where if you were going to do like, oh, we're going to do a whole comic book in a week, or something like that, like, then yeah, you're going to just sit down and knock the pages out and do it very quickly. And you just don't have time to go back and be nitpicky. You just have to get it done. And there's something to be said for that, of course. But I also think, you have to have a long view of success, and you have to have a long view of doing these things. And so I've got ideas, and these ideas are always bubbling in my head, and I can't stop them. And I think a lot of people probably understand what I'm talking about. You get ideas, and then while you're fleshing out one idea, you have 3 more ideas that pop into your head for other things. And then suddenly, like, one of those, like, catches hold, and you really want to just drop the other idea you're working on and just start working on that one because it has you really excited. But you can't do that, because if you do that, you'll never be finished. So, I mean, the key is to write it down, of course. Write down everything, whatever you have, whether it's just half of an idea, or if it's a whole really fleshed out idea you've got, write it all down. Get that stuff down on paper or whatever it is that you use. I'm kind of old school. I like to write things down. I like to just use notebooks and stuff, although they can get lost, so can digital files too. But, like, just wherever I have it, notes on my phone or, whatever, on the computer or in an actual notebook, or even just something, I'll write something in one of my sketchbooks or something. Like, just get it down, have it. It could be something as simple as just a name. It could be a character name. It could be a title. It could be whatever. But you just need to just write it down. You just need to get it. And then you need to keep going, though. That's the thing. You need to get back to the other idea that you're working on, and you need to finish. And that's where most people fall apart, is they don't finish their ideas. And I'm just as guilty of that as anyone else is. As by virtue of the fact that, have you seen yes, you can go to my website, you can go on Tapas, and you can see a bunch of comic books that I did that are technically finished comic books, but they're comic books I did when I was a kid, and most of them are like 7 pages long. It's not like they're a full comic book. There might be one or two that's like a little bit longer, like 14 pages or something like that, but, come on. Have I put, by virtue of the fact that I haven't put out you haven't seen a real comic book done by me out there, it just shows you I'm as guilty as anyone else of not finishing my ideas. One idea I did finish was I wrote a book a few years back, well, quite a few years back now at this point. I've never put it out anywhere. I've never tried to publish it. I've never done anything with it. I may at some point revisit it and put it out. I'll probably have to do some editing on it because, like I said, I did write it quite a number of years ago. But I still do think the story's good and the characters are good and it's a fun story. It's a science fiction story, so I might put that out at some point. At some point, I may put that out there for people to hopefully enjoy. But I do feel a little like my creative short-term urges now are kind of being filled by this channel, to an extent. Most of it is just me talking, but I am able to get some ideas out and do some stuff. And, I was really proud of my one I did yesterday where I talked about how comic book pros should act more like professional wrestlers. If you didn't see that, definitely go check that one out. That was CarCast number 8, I believe. I think this is number 9. I don't know. It's whatever one I did yesterday, so it's the last one. Whatever number this is, go one number less, and that's the one. And it's titled Why Comic Book Pros Should Be More Like Pro Wrestlers or something like that. But definitely check that out. But I was really proud of that one. I felt it. I was feeling it. I was preaching. And it was good. It was a good thing. I think at some point I may have to just go all out and let you guys, really let you guys know how I feel about some things. I may have to jump into the Star Wars fray. I was trying to avoid it because that's really, there's so many other channels that do Star Wars, and I don't know if I really want to become a Star Wars channel, but I may have to put my 2 cents in. we'll see. I'm not sure about whether I'm going to do that or not. I probably will, because I am a big Star Wars fan, or at least I have been. So I may feel the need to express myself, especially as we get closer to episode 9. We'll see. I don't know. But as far as like creative urges go, I feel like, other people can relate. You get this urge, you have this need, and it almost becomes a physical need to create something. And it could just be, I just need to do a drawing. I just need to draw something today, or it could be something more elaborate, but I think everybody can understand where I'm coming from with that. And that's why I feel like, you can tell, like, a lot of these comic book pros that are making comic books now, like, they don't seem to have that need. They just seem to be filling a contract. They're hired to do something, so they're doing it, and they don't really care about it. They don't really love it. They don't have any love for the art form or for what comic books have always been. The great thing about comic books is you literally can have a story about anything. And, you can have stories about superheroes, you can have stories about criminals, you can have stories about demons and angels and monsters or whatever. I mean, you can have romance stories. It's literally any type of story can be told in the comic book format. And the funny thing is it seems like instead of just doing that, these pros now want to tell those stories, but they want to piggyback on the popularity of the superheroes and just turn them into whatever they want, whatever kind of story they want to write, instead of writing for the character. It's a lot like, and honestly, it's funny because I'm getting close to home, but now I'm really coming up with an idea for a topic, and maybe I'll save it. I'll probably save it. I'll just give you this little tidbit. What comic book pros nowadays seem to be doing is what you sometimes will see a coach do in sports when it's a scheme versus their personnel. I'll just leave it at that, and we'll come back to it at another time, and maybe tomorrow I'll expand on that a little bit more on my way home tomorrow night, or some other time. Maybe I'll do another video about that. But as far as the creativity goes and the need to create, and people, I think human beings just in general like to create. And I feel like when you're creating because you've been inspired, you do better work. I get it that, like, it's a job, but you can still have a job and still be inspired to do good work. And the funny thing is these people who are on these books now, they're never on these books for that long anymore. I remember years ago, guys would have runs, artists and writers would have runs on books that would last for years. Now, people have like a 6-issue run and they're done, and they move on, and then they reboot the book and they give it a new number 1, and it's a new creative team and everything else, and there's like no continuity going on there. And it's really kind of weird, and I think part of the reason for that is because of this jobification, I guess you could call it, of the comic book industry, of people who are just doing it to have a job because they don't want to work in a real job, quote unquote. So they make comic books instead. And, their friend hired them, or somebody they knew hired them, and so they just do this. So that's why you have stories about, super-powered characters looking for YouTubers or something. And honestly, I don't really mind the idea of a superhero trying to find a missing YouTuber. I mean, let's be honest, how many stories have been done over the years, like, not so much superhero stories, but like TV shows, like cop shows and that kind of thing, of like celebrities go missing and someone has to find them, or a celebrity is murdered and someone has to find the killer. Like, that kind of stuff has been done before, and that's fine. It's always a serviceable type of thing, and YouTube celebrities now are the new celebrities, so I don't really have that much of a problem with that idea per se. It's the way it's done, and the way every fight is lame because they're being written by people who don't care about action. They don't care about the fighting. For them, the fighting is just like, for them, here's what it is. For them, every fight is Marty McFly versus Biff. George McFly versus Biff Tannen. It's the, hey, you, get your damn hands off her. one punch, done. And that's the big dramatic moment, and that's the fight. And that's fine in a story like Back to the Future, which is not an action movie. But comic books are inherently like action movies. Superhero comics are inherently like action movies. You want to see people getting slammed into the side of a building, people throwing cars at one another, people getting knocked all over the place and just getting the crap beat out of them, and their costumes getting... Who doesn't love a good knockdown drag out in a superhero comic book where the hero's costume gets all ripped up, but he's still in there fighting? Like, and there's always that super cool panel of like, he got slammed into a brick wall and the whole thing collapsed around him, and here he comes out of it, and he's all ripped up and scratched up, and his costume is ripped, but he's coming back for more, you know? Like, that's what comic books are. It's not George McFly, Biff Tannen, swing, one punch, done. That's for a different type of story. That is not for superheroes. Superheroes fight supervillains because they need to have people who they can actually have a good match against. It would be boring if it was all, oh, the Hulk is taking on, you know, this guy who's guilty of insider trading on Wall Street. Like, who cares? The Hulk would squish him in one swat, and that would be the end of it. Like, that's while that might be funny as a punchline at some point in a book, that certainly could not be the climax of a book. You know, let's look at, I mean, it just makes no sense. They need to be like action movies. You look at like a John Wick, like, for God's sake, like, that dude went through hell, like, in that movie, like, and that's a great movie. You know, that's what you need. You need that kind of thing. You need knockdown drag-outs. You need, you know, if it's a Punisher-type character, you need gunfights and bullets flying everywhere and people barely able to escape death and, you know. You know, that's what you need. And so, you know, it's kind of silly. Like, I don't know. It just seems like they're just doing it for a job. They're not doing it for love. They don't love the comic books. They don't love the characters. You know, I say it all the time. I mean, one of my little pet peeves is Kraven the Hunter. They've turned him into such a joke. And for some reason, they all love to use him. And I don't know why, because they clearly don't like the character. They all want to use him in their stories, but they obviously don't like him, because if you look at the way they write him, he's a joke. They make him an absolute joke. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, if you want to use a character, use the real character the way he's supposed to be. Anyway, I'm home. This is a little bit of a rambling one. I finally got to a point, I think, at some point. So that's it. I'm going to go have some dinner, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Still got to work on my outros, dude. Still got to work on my outros.